Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking again with Patrick Lockwood. Patrick's a psychologist, and today we were going to be talking about what all this isolation, some of the effects it might have, and maybe some ways to stave off madness. Hey Patrick, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Uh, So, anyways, we were just talking about this, so
hmm
it's not going too bad for you so far, I take it?
Yeah, so far I'm doing pretty well in the Los Angeles quarantine, and it's not the kind of military state that people think it is here. It's most people are going about their regular lives, but they're just spending kind of an excessive amount of time at home. That's the main difference. So people still go for a walk, people still go to the store, etc. People get, food from restaurants and bring it home, etc. But the goal is just to kind of limit how many people are in an enclosed space at any given time. That's the main goal.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is now, and that's hopefully what people will do because the alternative is, you know, forced lockdown by the state, right? And you don't want
Yeah,
that. I think
right.
like San Francisco is under that right now, but even that they're allowing still you to go out like once a week to get your food and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I know some places they allow you, you know, 30 minutes or 60 minutes a day where you can go exercise alone, like go for a walk or something, but do it alone type of thing, right? Like I don't know if that's in
I've
San
been
Francisco.
hearing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like that's okay. Same thing in Montreal. There's, you know, I got everything I needed. Like I had to go to the drugstore this past week to pick up, like refill my prescription for a couple of months. But aside from that, I had everything I needed. But I'm still going out, a couple of times a day, go for a walk around the block or go do something. Just get out of my house because I am used to being stuck inside and being isolated. But sometimes you need to get out for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think that's part of what's going to keep us all sane in this process is making sure that we find the optimal amount of time that we can tolerate inside before we switch it up and go outside. Um,
yeah, but there's also like certain things like I think. The inside thing. Like this is a suggestion I'd given to a couple of friends. I was like, if you're getting really that bad and you want to speak to people, whatever, I'm like, get a bunch of friends together, get a Google Hangout going,
yeah.
and have a meal over the Hangout. Like like go all
Yeah.
out and like dress up or something if you want, and like like just eat, like eat a meal over a Google Hangout. Granted, it's not the same, but you're still sharing a meal. You're still talking. You're whatever. Like you can pretend like you're going out. You can do something. I mean, like you're gonna have to get creative in ways of how you want to have contact with people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the space that we're in right now is creativity, and that's going to be key for everyone is making sure that whatever they can do to reinvent what they normally would do is going to work for them. And in some cases, we can't reinvent what we used to do, so we have to shift and change, and that's not fun. It's not easy. Most of us are pretty straightforwardly creatures of habit, so most people's habits have just been destroyed by this virus. So it's going to be a pretty strong kind of conflict period for the next couple of weeks while people figure this out and develop new ruts and new habits, I think.
Yeah, okay, that's one thing. Like, I've spoken before, so I mean, like I was in war zones for a while, and then I was up in northern Quebec. Now, I kind of describe that similar to what this is. It's like being isolated, but in a crowd. Like there,
Northern
I was.
Quebec was a war zone.
Well, no, it wasn't a war zone. I said war zones and northern Quebec. That's
Okay, just wanted
yeah,
to make sure.
yeah. No, northern Quebec was just it was far more isolated in some ways, but it wasn't a war zone. Um, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, like in all those places, you're around people, but you're kind of by yourself. Like northern Quebec, I went up there as a contractor, so I made friends and everything, but you're all doing your own thing. You're all in your homes, so it's kind of like now, like you go to work, you see your friends or whatever, and then you come back home and you're kind of isolated by yourself. Um, but like that was one of the things, like needing to get a routine set up. It could just be okay. I'm going to clean from 9 to 10 every morning, and then I'm going to clean again in the evening, and then like from 11 to 12 I'll cook my lunch, and like if obviously if you're working from home or if you've got classes from home, it makes it a lot
Yeah.
easier to set up that schedule. But setting up a routine and setting up a schedule right away and sticking to it is the best way I know to, stave off the boredom, because you're just focusing on the next task.
Sure. And I think it's very difficult for people to find a routine, excuse me, in circumstances where, they've never had to exist before. Most people have existed with a lot of freedom, so they had a lot of, let's say, open range to work with, some excesses and liberalities to work with, and now we don't have that. So it's really going to test people's creativity in the sense of, if you don't need to wash your dishes twice a day, what do you do with that extra hour, right?
Yeah.
So and then beyond even that, the shifting the mindset to I'm going to spend my life inside, I think is going to be a substantial challenge for people. I really do. I think it's something that we take for granted all day, that we get to walk and go outside. Yep. Most people have no reference point for, being quarantined, or, what happened in major historical events in the early 19 teens and 20s in the United States, and in other parts of the world where people did have to be locked down.
Yeah. Okay, this is a very, very extreme case of it, but when I was in Bosnia, I'd spoken to a couple of people, and during the war there, one girl, her family had been stuck in a basement for 3 years in Sarajevo.
Yeah.
They would sneak out at nights now and then to go, scavenge for food and stuff. But pretty much 3 years in a basement in Sarajevo. So, it's not like saying, oh, well, look, they had it tough, we have it easy. But in some ways we do,
Sure.
Like you and I you're in California, I'm in Montreal, we're sitting here talking, we can do this. They didn't have that luxury. There's
right.
a lot of things that they, so there are ways we can make the best of it, especially now, with all the streaming services, all the games you can play online. And I don't mean just the World of Warcraft, that kind of stuff, but even the ones on the phones and all that, all those things. There's so much stuff you can do to keep yourselves occupied and connected with others. I think you got to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think the best case scenario is people go out there and they try new things. They try new games, they listen to new music, they watch new movies, they watch old movies, whatever it is, they watch foreign films, etc. But that comes to the problem. There's this pretty classic psychology finding, I think it replicates, if I'm not mistaken, where the more choices we have, the more we kind of get bogged down. So our issue is, if we have too much choice, then all of a sudden we don't know what to do. Yeah. Right? Because it's just, well, where do I start? Which end of the literary universe do I go? There's a bunch of free books online. How do I pick a book? I don't know. I haven't had to read in decades, right? Because I've been on my phone for decades now. So what do I do?
Actually, speaking of that, if people do want to read, the New York Public Library just made 300,000 books available for free online as PDFs.
Good.
So you can so let's just say, in this vein, so you like mysteries. So you can go to the New York Public Library website, check out mysteries, and then, so yes, fine, you have a lot of choices, but it's not 300,000 books, it's just that subset of mysteries, right? And so
sure.
it might make things easier.
Yeah, I think if all libraries did that would be great. And, some of the academic publishers are doing their best to do that as well. I think JSTOR just made all of their content free for the foreseeable future. And wouldn't it be cool if someone like Audible did that, where they made their content free for the next couple of months while we're going through this nonsense?
Yeah, or even some of the streaming services, if they said, like Netflix or Prime or whatever, and just said, okay, you know what, for the duration, we'll give it we'll give it away for free or something. Because to them, yes, granted, it's $10 a person or something, but take the number of people doing it, they lose a lot of money, but still, I think they've got a little bit of a buffer that they can, a month or two they can survive. But
well, probably, but again, it's a good faith, goodwill effort, and to be fair, a lot of good faith in a time of hardship can build customers later on. So it works on all levels to be altruistic. People just don't see it because they're worried about the short-term profits, not the long-term profits.
Well, I think actually you're seeing it with some businesses, there's all those distilleries that started making hand sanitizer and just giving it away, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
building up good faith. There's also a bunch of hotels that are saying, we're going to give up, like our hotels are empty. NHS workers or people who need to be quarantined or whatever can stay in our hotels and they can stay here, and like things like that. People will remember, and people will also remember the ones who are being completely egregious, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and they're gonna repay that, like, oh well, you did what you provided a service, I'm gonna give you my custom. Whereas the other one, well, sorry, you tried to screw people over, so flounder, right? Like they're
Yeah.
I think that is going to come out, and that's one of the things I noticed when I was overseas was the generosity of spirit. Like
Hmm.
we were all stuck there. Especially Afghanistan. That was arguably the most dangerous place I was, and everyone felt that, everyone realized it. So if you got a care package, you shared it with everyone in your in where you worked. You got like people. We always looked out for each other. We made sure everything was okay. We and you're seeing that now too. Like I said, like again, like like those distilleries and things like that. You hear about restaurants that are making food and sending them to hospitals so they have food to eat and things like that, right? Like you are seeing a lot of that as well.
Hmm. Yeah. And the nice thing is, we see a lot of that solidarity already, right? I think there's plenty of people out there that are pushing for solidarity, and we can make it through this. There are some people who are not, obviously, but the main thrust that I see both online and in the real world is that let's try and get through this together. That's the attitude that I think is going to help us in this moment.
All right, speak of that, because I spoke about this yesterday with Bo, and it was so you see those pictures of those kids at spring break, and you see the pictures from the beaches in Australia, right?
Right.
And most of them are young kids.
Right.
And so my take on that was this is fight or flight in like hyperdrive. And because
Sure.
in this instance, flight is fight. Like to fight, you have to actually run away, right?
Yeah.
And so, but when you're 19 years old and your hormones are raging and there's booze going, like, the baser instinct's going to take it. And like for them, fighting is, this is me fighting. But like, the running away is the fighting.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of good justifications that they can probably operate under. One is I'm staying away from, stores and concerts and stuff, but I'm going to spring break where there's a bunch of people my age who, I guess the best rationalization is we're all the same age group, so we're less likely to get sick from each other or something. I don't know, honestly. But regardless of it, kids are dumb. Kids are dumb. That's my clinical opinion. When we're young, we're not so wise, we're not so sophisticated, and it's really not more complicated than that. It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're doing something morally abhorrent. They're just dumb kids, and hopefully they learn from it and they regret it and they don't hurt people. That's the main thing that we can hope for at this point.
Yeah, I think like something you mentioned there is part of the issue, but over the last several years, at least since Trump, the distrust of the media,
Sure.
has gotten so bad that no one really knows who to go to. So that's one issue. But the other issue is like these kids thinking that, we're not going to get infected from each other. Like, because the thing that was being pushed is, okay, it's mainly older people or people with underlying issues that face a larger risk of death. And people just equated the risk of death with the risk of contracting it, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I think some numbers just coming out in the last few days out of Spain and Italy and maybe Holland were that the majority of the people who were getting sick and hospitalized were between 20 and 54. So they were getting sick. They were getting sick enough to be hospitalized. They were recovering, but they used up those resources. Like, so these kids going there and partying, you probably won't die, but you might get really, really sick, and then you might infect other people around you, right? So like that's
and you might be eating up resources for people who are critically ill, and that's the main thing, is that I think we kind of lose sight of the real fight here. So we have to have kind of stacked or tiered priorities here. So the top tier priority is the people who are most likely to die, right? That's how most kind of level-headed people that I trust and I follow are talking about this. So you got people like Nick Christakis who are talking about, let's make sure that we limit the spread so that the people who are most likely to get hurt have the least impact so we don't overwhelm our critical hospital infrastructure. And I don't think these kids are thinking about our critical hospital infrastructure. They don't know the number of ventilators that we have in the United States. They don't know how much we have of this drug or that drug. They don't get the supply chain. Hell, most adults don't understand the supply chain in medicine. You'd have to actually have worked in a hospital to see how just janky, to use a phrase, the supply chain typically is. And we're not built for pandemics. We're built for everyday, routine, slow trickle of severe cases. We're not built for, 1,000 cases a day.
Or like a localized, like let's say Hurricane Katrina, right? So it's one region of the states, and medical facilities from all around the country can send supplies there, which is like right now it's pandemic, it's affecting everything, so you have to like if I'm in New York, I can't send stuff to LA because I need it right here. Like it's that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. That's the problem, is we can't just shift resources from one area to another. Like right now, New York is pretty badly hit. They have over 8,000 cases, to my knowledge, and now they're really badly struggling with trying to keep up with that. And they're pretty close to that maximum critical bed capacity, too, from what I understand. So the goal is to make sure we don't limit that critical bed capacity when the time comes, which is why it's so great, by the way, that hospitals are partnering with hotels and other facilities to make sure that if there is space that they need to put more beds to do more work, they've got it now, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, again, I think this comes down to a huge issue of, I don't want to like harp on the education thing, but like when they stop taking stuff like civics out, like I'm not talking about anything else, just like stopping civics classes. Yeah. Because people keep prattling on about their rights. Oh, I'm losing my civil liberties, but it's okay. You know what? If you take a civics class, you would probably also learn that the citizen has an obligation, and this is where that obligation comes in. Like, if the government asks you, like, okay, would you please stop going to restaurants? Would you please stop doing this? We need you to do this for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, right? If people understood that and realized that they have an obligation to do that, then the government wouldn't have to get ham-fisted.
Well, right, exactly. You're exactly right. I mean, we implicitly know that we're in a time of crisis, and most people are doing their best to not lose their minds all day about that. Mm-hmm. So the problem that shows up is, at least my take of it is when people are struggling with this and they're doing their best to cope with it, and then you hear another announcement from, the governor or the president or Dr. Fauci or whoever it is, right, that's recommending even more stringent limitations, that's naturally going to make people more fearful. And we've got, as you kind of referenced earlier, we've got about 6 different choices when we have pretty strong threats in our lives: fight, flight, freeze, fall over, stuff like that. And for many people, fight might mean rebel, right? That typically means rebel and don't you dare step on me and take away my gun rights and things of that nature, which is, again, perfectly normal. What people don't, in the culture war, the people who are bad-mouthing each other online, this is all perfectly normal, right? This fight, flight, or freeze, don't take my rights away. That's all perfectly normal. What's the problem is how we treat each other with it. So if we can work on responding better to it, then we can more easily convince people to go with the flow in this time. That's my take, is if we help people decrease the fear, then there's less of that, ultra libertarian, don't you take my guns, don't you tell me to stay inside, radical attitude.
Okay, I mean, on the thing with the briefings and stuff, saying the same information every day, you kind of dull the message. Like, the briefings should be, if you don't have anything new to report, keep it brief. Keep it like, we're working on it. We're doing, we're continuing doing blah 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 blah. We're working on it. Things are going to get better, and that's about all it should be. But if you have new stuff to report, then report the new stuff. I mean, okay. And speaking about briefings and stuff like that, now, when for like, okay, the only place I saw had this happen was Afghanistan, because it was the only real active war zone. Like Sudan was, but not really. Um,
Yeah.
so in
Okay.
Afghanistan, I was at, I don't want to give a number, but I was a lot of what were called ramp ceremonies. So basically, that's the when they bring the body back home. So the coffin is being loaded on the plane. You know, the whole unit's there. Usually the whole base. The person's commander says a few words. It's almost like a funeral on the base. So I went to over 20 of them. I can't, and that was in 18 months.
Wow.
Then my last year, my last contract, so the last 2 years I was there, every Friday they would do what was called Fallen Heroes. So they would list off the names of the people that died that week. So it was soldiers, so U.S. soldiers, Afghan Army, NATO soldiers, Afghan Army soldiers, Afghan police, and if there were any contractors, right? So they would list those off. So you're reminded about death all the time. I mean, it was in your face, and it can get a little overwhelming.
Sure.
And unfortunately, we're going to get a lot of reminders of that. We're going to get a lot of reminders of our own mortality, and you're going to see a lot of it. And it's, if you can't deal with it, the only thing I'd say is tune it out. Like, I don't know if you got anything else to say on that, or.
Yeah, I think that's actually an extremely important point beyond the whole social isolation topic, is the death thing. And it's difficult. I mean, most people that I've met have never seen someone die, number one, and they've never really experienced significant losses in their life. I tend to hang out with a kind of younger 30s to 40s crowd. So this is the age group of people who, hasn't really lost anyone significant, parents, friends. They're not in the military. I hang out with a bunch of nerds. So, I've lost people. I've seen someone die. It's not fun, and it definitely leaves a mark on you that you're not prepared for. And people are going to lose parents. They're going to lose grandparents. They're going to lose extended family members. They're going to lose colleagues. There are going to be a number of people who die. And I don't mean to be alarmist. I'm not trying to stoke fear or say anything inflammatory, etc. My goal is to say that it's going to happen, because it's a very kind of virulent form of a virus that we don't have even regular vaccines for in the first place. So it's a very, very, very tough bug to kill, and it's a very, very tough thing to treat effectively. So we should be ready for the fact that lots of people are going to die before we're ready to lose them. And having gone through that twice in my life in the last couple of years, it's very tough. And at some point, you have to be okay with the fact that you're going to feel despondent. Accepting the idea that this horrific thing is happening is the hardest task, but it's the only one that we can focus on when it comes to loss. Acceptance. That's your main goal. And how you get there is going to differ from person to person. Some people go through, the classic 5 stages of grieving and all that nonsense, which is not a real model, by the way. There's no real good evidence supporting those 5 stages of grief, but it's a handy way of talking about how, at least in Western culture, most people go through, some bargaining, some anger, stuff like that. That's common. That doesn't mean that it's a linear thing or it's a real kind of process. But again, everyone grieves very, very differently. I did a video on loss years ago, and I said basically the same thing. You just have to be okay with the fact that you're going to feel like shit, and that's normal. And there's nothing you can do other than, in your words, tune it out, or do your best to accept it by understanding that this is a time that we have minimal control over. In this circumstance, we have minimal control over, other than the social distancing, basically.
And also, okay, I don't want to stick too much on this because it will be a downer, but okay, I was in Bosnia when my dad passed away, right? So
sure.
My dad went into the hospital November 30th.
Sure.
He got diagnosed with lung cancer, and they were talking about starting treatment, this and that. He was in the hospital, and it was December 8th, and he'd also just recovered from pneumonia, so they kept him in the hospital because he was still a little weak. And so then I was making arrangements with work to go back to Montreal, and on December 8th, my brother calls me and says, "You better, get here right away. It's like any day now." And So my work got me a flight for the next morning, and my dad passed away. So like I never got to say goodbye to my dad.
Wow.
Now that's going to happen to a lot of people here because if someone's
Yeah.
that sick, they're in a hospital, they're completely isolated, and they're quarantined, and you're not going to be able to get to say goodbye, or in some cases, you're not going to be able to get to say goodbye to your loved ones.
Right.
And I mean, I don't want to say because you can't prepare for it, but
You can.
I think you have to be aware of that in the back of your mind that might become a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the best advice you could give. I appreciate you sharing that because there's nothing you can do to prepare for that. I mean, there's no way of actually knowing what that's going to feel like and how you're going to react, right? I'm sure you probably had some anticipation, but once you actually learned that he passed, I'm sure it was totally different.
Right.
And yeah, it's one of those things where we're all going to do our best to cope and respond the way that we need to respond here. And our main goal, I think now, in terms of cooperation, is just being okay with people who are really badly struggling. Like, this is a time for us to be more compassionate towards people, not less. This is a time for us to work together more, not be more tribalistic,
And in that vein, like again, I've liked, tweets where people are ridiculing those kids because, okay, frankly, it is pretty stupid.
Yeah, it is.
But like, okay, that stupid Imagine video that they just did, okay, which is like really cringeworthy and really awful.
Yes.
Or there was that, what's her name? 20-something movie star, singer. I think she's Latino. I don't know her name. She came out and she said, "Oh, what's the big deal? Old people are going to die. It doesn't affect me. I got to get over it." And everyone was,
wow.
like I said, she's like 21, 22. She's a singer, movie star. She's, whatever, man, the intelligence of a small soap dish. No, but okay, people are going like totally, okay, yes, fine. What you said was stupid.
Yeah.
But again, like, people don't know how to react to these things. Let's cut them some slack. Like, the people we shouldn't cut slack are people like Candace Owens, right? She's apparently a pundit. She's got a huge following. She's, a news show or whatever, right? And she's saying, "Oh, this is no big deal, whatever. This is all garbage. Go out and do whatever you want." It's like, no, okay. You there have a responsibility. Like I said, this actress, singer, who's famous, fine, but is never, put herself off as someone who is, a font of information or, a pundit or anything like that. It's just saying something
Right.
because she's frustrated, or those, celebrities doing that, like I said, that cringeworthy version of Imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're getting some stuff out, whatever. Maybe it's the exhibitionist and the celebrity that needs to be in front of the people. I don't know. Maybe there's part of that as well.
Right.
Like
Right.
Madonna singing there the other day. That was pretty awful too. Like, so.
Oh, Lord.
But I mean, like, okay. I think we're gonna have to cut these people some slack. Yes, it's stupid. We can roll our eyes and we can say whatever, and then just don't forward it on. Don't whatever. Don't give them the light that they want, anyways.
Well, right. I mean, that's something that I have, ripped my hair out over on Twitter in particular, is the idea of not rewarding behavior. It's like these people, if I could teach 2 classes to everyone on the planet that would dramatically change all of our behavior, one of them would be a basic behaviorism class to differentiate how positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, and the different reinforcement schedules work. Because then you could hack business and you could hack each other pretty straightforwardly. The second thing I would teach people is developmental psychology. So then you could actually understand how, let's say, regressed or childish, how simply people are built and how primitive we are as a species. So the issue with these videos is really straightforward. It's that they need attention. There's nothing wrong with that. If you like them, you're giving them attention. So every like, every retweet, every share, every negative comment is positive reinforcement. People don't get that. That's why I'm trying to side with people like Stephen Fry on the culture war stuff. If we just don't talk about it, then we automatically don't reinforce it, and the rest of the world drops it for a period so we can focus on more constructive things and things that bring us together and cooperate and stuff like that. It's not a matter of, only talking about the virus. It's a matter of talking about this other stuff that brings us together as humans. And in their own stupid way, maybe this Imagine thing, this horrible remake of the song, is their best attempt at trying to bring us together. And lo and behold, here we are, all criticizing them at the exact same time.
Yeah.
So we're definitely together. We're just together for the wrong reason, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, okay, like that's why. I mean, the only reason I brought it up is because I keep seeing it. And it's like, and most of the people I see sharing it are like, "Oh my God, look how horrible this is!" And it's like, to me, that's like, okay, and like when you're a kid, it's like, "Oh, this tastes gross. You want to taste it?" It's like that's the kind of thing. Like that's the oh, this is so awful. Like and it's like that's that. Oh, this tastes gross. Taste it. It's just
Yeah, totally. And that's perfectly understandable. I will say, from the point of view as a performer, because I've been one before, it's kind of the old biblical rule of, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, etc. And I've had plenty of, terrible performances where I try to do something clever, etc., and it didn't go so well. So, I'm not going to judge these people for trying to remake Imagine, even though it wouldn't be my preference. I'm not going to judge them because I've also made similar blunders in my vocal career. So I get that.
Okay, just sticking with this for a second. Like, if you look at someone like Schwarzenegger, because he's put out a couple. Now, okay, fine, you can say it's attention-seeking or whatever, but at the same time, the first one he was feeding like a little Shetland pony and a donkey.
It was.
Yeah, okay, and he's just like, oh, we're staying at home or whatever. Okay, that's fine. He's putting out a decent message, and he's also making people laugh a little bit. And then he did one.
Which is good.
He did one yesterday or the day before, where he's like, thank you to all the doctors and the nurses and the people stocking the grocery shelves and all that. Okay, again, it's a good message. It's I don't want to tell entertainers or I don't want to tell anyone exactly what to do, but I mean, he's getting attention. People are looking at him. If that's being shared, it's sharing a good message, and no one's really sharing that, saying, "Oh, look how horrible this is," right?
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know, like, okay, there are also, like, you saw the stuff in Italy where there was, like, opera singers on balconies singing and stuff like that, or, like, I've seen a couple artists that say, okay, well, whatever, I'm going to put on a free show on YouTube, and you can come watch me put on a show and things like that, right? Or, again, okay, you're a musician, you want to perform, you're spending your time, you're spreading some joy, you're doing whatever, right? And you're getting to perform, so it's a win-win for everyone. And then again, after the fact, like you said, okay, you know what? I like this guy's music. I heard him during when we were locked away, and now I'm going to go buy his CD or whatever, like download his album, stuff like that. Like,
right. That's not scandalous or shystery or anything like that. That's just being a regular person. It's okay. It's not sick or pathological to say that there is an end to this in sight, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to continue your business and your career, despite the fact that this horrific thing is happening to all of us right now. That's okay. That's being human. What's not okay is price gouging and
Lord.
any other kind of like very shady and greedy behavior. Greedy and shady behavior is not okay. Trying to turn a quick buck off of this pandemic is not okay, which is why if you followed me, anytime I've offered support to people, I'm not looking for money, I'm not looking for clients, I'm looking to just be helpful if I can, because that's fucking stupid if you're looking to make $1 million right now. That's not okay.
Okay, and then speaking on that, and then again, this is like maybe I'm being too generous here, but I think it's 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat, or 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats who
something like that.
Yeah, sold off all their stocks right as soon as they found out, and then bought. Some of them actually bought shares in communications companies because they knew that those were going to go up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that might also be the fight or flight thing because I'm saving my ass. I'm like that's the first thing that kicked in, but I hold them a lot more responsible than I do those kids. These people are supposed to be, adults. They're supposed to be leaders. They're supposed to be, their job is to care for their constituents, and they didn't do that. They lost the public trust, and they profited off, the misery of others. And those people should be held to account at the highest level.
Yeah, I think even a conservative guy like Tucker Carlson said that they should be held to account for that kind of stuff because, again, let's assume the most charitable possible interpretation of what happened. They panicked. They were worried about losing millions of dollars that they'd invested for their retirement or whatever rationalization they had. So they automatically disinvested and took out the money or reinvested somewhere else. So if it's just purely framed as a panic behavior, sure, that makes sense. They're human. They're entitled to be human. Now, once you go beyond the charitable interpretation, you now have to go, okay, what other ethical or moral responsibility did they sign up for in their job, right? Yeah. Because if they all of a sudden stop their job in a time of crisis, and this is interfering with their job and their ability to help the people, then that's a huge problem, right? That's kind of how I'm looking at it. If there's a charitable interpretation, but I think we have to layer on top of that charitable interpretation all of the things that they're responsible for and how this behavior, what we might call greedy behavior, does to their ability to effectively do their job and be supportive of the people.
Yeah, I mean, also with all this stuff, like right now, okay, those people suspend them or whatever, right? Now is not the time to do investigations and do all that stuff. Like you can suspend them and say, okay, you know what, we're gonna grab your stuff. You're gonna be in limbo for a little bit, right? Same thing with the recriminations against Trump. Oh well, in January he said this. Okay, let's focus on what's going on right now. If he's spreading bullshit now, call him on that. Keep a record of everything he did in the past. Like right now, at this moment, our job should be getting through this as quickly as possible with as small amount of damage as possible, and then whatever. Then afterwards, the administration didn't do this, the administration do that. These people stole money. We don't have time to waste resources on that. I mean, we have only so much, and we should focus on what's important.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. I mean, at least that's the mindset that I'm going with right now. Is even though people are still living fairly normal lives, we need to treat this as if it's a very serious issue. And if we get caught up in the regular politics, in the regular culture war, and let's impeach the guy, or let's whatever the thing, doesn't even matter. It's not worth it right now. If you destabilize the system right now in the middle of this crisis, even if it's a system you dislike, you could hate the guy, but you need to keep the system in place. I'm telling you, as someone who does like a lot of family therapy, who works with a lot of high crisis patients in my practice, that if you totally blow up the system in the middle of a family crisis, that results in loss and suffering. That's not necessary. So the goal is to keep the system afloat, even though it might not be working great, Yeah. And then once the crisis is over, then we can start talking about, well, how do we change this?
And I can talk about how to change it, but also, like I said, okay, again, I think this comes down to the lack of trusted media. Like, I've been in war zones, and I've been in meetings planning for like the overrun of the base and what to do if the base is being overrun, like literally, so disaster planning meetings. The military has, this plan is in effect, and so even as commanders change, the plan is the same. And so the new team that comes in will take over from the old team. Getting rid of that pandemic team, there was no institutional memory of that when this happened. And if you're in the public sector and you get let go, the private sector usually gobbles you up for a lot more money. So, we can get these people back when you want. Like, no, you can't. They're not going to come back. And like having that plan in place, and even though it's going to cost you money and it's taxpayer money, you might say it's a waste. But right now that might have been the difference in January of what happened and how it was reacted. And you might have had a lot less cases in the States, or you might have been a lot more prepared. It might not have been as bad now as it was. We don't know, but from my experience and having those plans and that kind of stuff in place, that helps a lot.
Sure, I would assume that, if all the facts there are kind of spot on, that, maybe something could have been done more. I'm not particularly acquainted with all that, so I'm not really here to
Yeah.
necessarily comment on that. But yeah, I mean, the more we keep stable structure in place, the better we do. That's the general rule of thumb, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a bummer. It's a bummer that we're treating this kind of a bummer.
Again, the China virus thing. This is, I think it's because it's something like that is comfortable, right?
Sure.
It's familiar. So this dealing with this virus is also, dealing with being isolated, whatever. So
Yeah.
when you can focus on Trump saying something like the China virus, that's like, oh, I know that. That's familiar.
Yeah.
That's safe territory.
Yeah.
But again, to me, it reminded me of those. Should we or should we not call those concentration camps on the border when they were bringing the
Oh,
illegal?
yeah.
Like, okay, let's help them, and then figure out what you want to call them. It's the same thing in this case, right? If Trump calls it the China virus, just reply to him saying coronavirus. Don't even acknowledge the fact that he said it. It's too much, wasting too much oxygen.
Well, right, and that's the point, is people don't understand how positive reinforcement works. If it's negative attention or positive attention, it can still be positive reinforcement. It can still be something that keeps and reinforces the behavior. They don't get that. So the problem is we don't need to even think about the name. Like, it's such a non sequitur that it does not matter. It's not like all of a sudden the world is going to end if you change the name or you say something racist. Believe it or not, racism is not going to destroy our capacity to deal with this pandemic. As much as, the James Lindsays of the world and the SJWs of the world, it's not going to do anything. It's not what matters right now. And I'm doing my damnedest to try and convince all these people.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you, but I see, like, I side with James on some of these things. Like, when you see an article, granted it's Vice, so grain of salt and whatever, but
Yeah.
the asking for trans people to wait for their surgeries while they deal with COVID-19 is like transphobic. Okay, there's an issue there, right? Again, you're wasting oxygen on something that doesn't need to be wasted oxygen on. Or there was a thing in the Atlantic, which, I mean, again, the Atlantic is a bigger paper, more respected than Vice, and they're talking about, yes, while more men die, women will be more affected by the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's okay. You don't need this shit right now, and I could see where James is saying, like, this is why we need to stop this stuff. Like, I think his whole point is we need to stop the critical theory garbage, because in a situation like this, that's not helping. And because when the Atlantic and when Vice, which are big enough, start printing this stuff, are you going to see something like that in the Guardian now? I mean, it's just, it's like, that's where it's I think that does take up oxygen that doesn't need to be taken up. It's the same thing with the naming with the Trump thing, but the Trump thing, it's the mainstream media bringing this up, and this, it's just like, there's a doctor today who was talking, and I don't know what he's a doctor in. He was talking about how, we need to look at intersectionality to figure out why it affects men more.
Yeah.
Like, no, that has no bearing, right?
Right. And again, I'm generally with James in the sense that, this is going too far in many cases, and you've got the radical fringe that's just making all sorts of noise and are potentially kind of limiting our social capacity. The problem is, it's not critical theory, number one. I think we've talked about this. The problem for me is not the critical theory. Critical theory is fine. It's a tool. It's like a handgun. You put the handgun on the table. You never pull the hammer back. You never press the trigger. Nothing ever gets fired. It's just a tool. It's how you use the tool, right? So I'm not with them in how they describe critical theory and how they blame necessarily critical theory, because there's a deeper underlying problem, not critical theory. There's this mentality of being a victim that's the problem, and this fear-driven, trauma-driven, I'm other problem that they're experiencing. So that's my main point of contention, is they're not going deep enough. They're dealing with a meta problem, They're not dealing with a core problem when they're talking about critical theory. But in addition to that, back to the Vox article and all that stuff, if we don't reinforce it, if we don't like it, if we don't share it, it dies. They don't write another one. This is all about positive reinforcement. People are not, people, it will die if we don't pay attention to it. If we retweet it, if we like it, if we dunk on it, then it will definitely be positively reinforced.
Yeah, okay, I agree with you there, and I don't think I've shared it. Like I said, again, probably liked someone saying, okay, this is, but
yeah,
the celebrity stuff is harmless one way or another.
Sure.
This stuff, like, I have friends who aren't in school and stuff who buy into this crap. So if they read that, right? So there's enough for me. In my mind, there's enough people that are getting that are going to be wasting their time and other people's time and trying to bring this stuff in because of crap like that. Whereas the celebrity thing, it's just an annoyance, and it's like, okay, stop getting frustrated about this. Just don't even look at it. Whereas this stuff, I think, can do actual damage because there are people who buy into it and believe it, and some of them have access to power.
I think it can do damage, but I think, again, if we operate on the best behavioral principles, then it doesn't get to grow. I mean, the main issue, my contention is, A, it's not the theory, and B, we are paying too much attention to it. So if we keep feeding the monster, then the monster keeps growing, right? That's the main issue here. So,
yeah.
And I've talked elsewhere about how we can deal with the critical theory problem, but the short version here, in my opinion, is if we take these things seriously right now, I think we're wasting our efforts. That's my main issue right now, is we've got this serious problem. I don't think some postmodernists who are trying to deconstruct gender or something of that nature are going to be the main issue right now. And giving them more of a voice by retweeting them doesn't seem to make much sense to me.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. But, like I said, my only concern is that there are people who take them seriously, and
sure,
if they're in, like my government, all right? My government's done a very good job. I'm not going to try to, I don't like Trudeau. I'm not a fan of his. But as so far as I can tell, like, the Canadian government's done a decent job, and the provincial governments have done a very good job. But at the same time, we've got a Ministry of Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth, whose one of their mandates is to make sure that all other government ministries and every single government policy that comes out has to have a gender-based plus analysis, intersectionality, on every single policy. So when you're trying to deal with something like that, when you're trying to deal with something like this, that will be an issue. So, like, for me right now, intersectionality and stuff is in government. Like, dogma is in government. Like, I consider intersectionality a dogma because it works in a dogmatic way, and it's in my government. And, like, I think they're not following that crap right now. But if they had taken it on full bore, and they were really doing this, but that's come from, people are making this kind of policy, or like civil servants, this and that. So that's where I'm worried a bit about this stuff getting into how are we going to deal with, the pandemic. Like, there was something out of Seattle about where they were putting the isolation centers when they first started putting them up, because Seattle was getting really hardly hit.
Right.
They were saying, they were basically alluding that it was racism because of the neighborhoods they were putting them up in. And it's like, okay, does a government really need to talk about that at this point? Like,
right.
Okay, so like I said, I think this stuff does have an impact because those articles are written or whatever. Yes, don't share them. I get that, but someone's reading them anyways, and someone's reading this stuff, and they're making policy based on it. So I could see where there is a need to push back on some of it.
Sure. And again, I'm not saying there's no need to push back. I'm just saying that it's not a top priority right now. And secondarily, I think the focusing on the theory itself is also, to use a quote from Clue, communism was just a red herring. It's kind of the same principle here. I think that critical theory is the red herring, and the problem is the actors, the people themselves, the people who are themselves sick or struggling, who are pushing this theory and twisting it and using it in a way that it's not originally designed to be. The Robin DiAngelos of the world, etc., are distorting what original critical theorists like Horkheimer, etc., wrote about. So that's the main issue for me.
Well, there, I should correct myself there, because when I say critical theory, I was thinking more of like, I wasn't talking about the original critical theory that came out of the Frankfurt School. I was talking more about like critical race theory, gender theory, like these things that they call them, like gender studies, queer theory, fat studies, like these things that came out of like what at one point I think James and Helen were calling it like applied postmodernism, like that stuff of it, like those theories themselves, not critical theory that came out of the Frankfurt School, right? Which again I have some issues with, but
yeah.
When I say critical theory, that's what I meant, and that's my fault. I was talking, we're kind of talking around each other there.
Sure, I get that, and again, it's just a matter of if we focus on the theory, it doesn't get us anywhere. If we focus on the people, that's what gets us somewhere. The people are the driver, not the theory. The theory's not going to do anything. It's like a gun. You stick the gun on the table, it does nothing, and it's a tool. You can use it to destroy people. You can use it to rebuild. It's up to you.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I've had these arguments around Islam where, oh well, it's not the religion, it's the practitioner. But I'm like, okay, if the religion says, admonish your wife, don't sleep with her, and then if she still doesn't listen, hit her. It's pretty black and white, right? Those are the instructions. So if critical race theory, like as it was laid out by, whatever. Crenshaw and D'Angelo and like whatever, all of them, right? I mean, it basically tells you straight out that white people are racist and everyone else isn't unless they act white. I mean, it's I'm simplifying it quite a bit, but I mean it spells that out. So beliefs do matter, and and so like I equate that stuff to a cult and to a religion because it is dogmatic. It reads like it, like it's. But anyways, we're getting a little far afield here. This is way off.
I understand. Yeah. I mean, again, it's a scary thing, and it has dogmatic tendencies, and there are dogmatic adherents, and we struggle with dogmatic things because they look scary and they have the potential to hurt lots of people. I get that. I'm cool with that. I'm just not cool with overly focusing on it right now. At the very least.
Look, I don't think it needs to be overly focused on, and let's focus on solving this stupid thing. And I shouldn't play it down. It's not a stupid thing, but let's focus on that, and let's focus on getting back to normal as quickly as possible. Okay, speaking of that, now, like my personal feeling is if they can get testing up and running properly, and if they do it like they did in Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and even South Korea. But after, because it spread really quickly because of again a religious nut, but their testing was you walk into one building, you get tested, like your temperature gets taken. If you show the slightest sign, then you get taken for further testing, right? If, like I said, I think it's going to take about 6 weeks or so if they start producing like they're talking about to get enough tests in place. And if we do that kind of aggressive testing, I don't think we're going to have to be isolated like this for more than 6 weeks.
I don't know.
But I mean, it depends on how they go. If they're just going to say, okay, what, everyone sit at home until we ride this thing out, it could be months. So,
yeah, I've seen projections for 6 months. I've seen projections for 3. I've seen projections for 2 months. I mean, I don't know what to. I mean, this is not anything close to my wheelhouse. I wish I could. I wish I could put on my best Nick Christakis impression and say something useful, but I don't know that I could.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, again, same here. I'm just going by. You can look at trends that happen in other places and see how they did it, and
Yeah.
And again, if we can, I think part of the problem here is that the individuality, right? Like everyone is individual. Whereas if you look at South Korea or Taiwan or Hong Kong or Singapore, and maybe Singapore is not the best example because they are a little authoritarian, but
Mm-hmm.
You have that social cohesion and you have that idea of civic responsibility, which, I don't think, like, we're seeing a lot of people getting together and stuff, but as far as, okay, we've got to stay home to protect everyone, like the United States especially is a very individualistic and very,
You bet.
it was built on that. It was built on, like, go west, young man, and, make your fortune and all that. Whereas these other countries are a lot more community oriented. And I think that needs to be stressed some more again. Like, we need to, if you want to get this over as quick as possible, do this for this amount of time, and it's going to get done, right?
And again, if we can just all adopt that same mentality, that if we just kind of all do our part, just keep it simple, stay inside, only go shopping, etc., then everything's going to be okay. Like, the vast majority of people are going to be okay. I think our infection rate is something like 1.8%, not our infection rate, our mortality rate is like 1.8%, I think, so far, as we're ramping up testing. So it's maintaining similarity from smaller to larger numbers. So if we can keep this social distancing going, we can keep the mortality rate low, it seems like.
I think in Canada, we've got over 1,000 cases, and I think there's only 12 deaths.
No, that's great.
I should say only 12 deaths, but it's.
Yeah, I know what you meant.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we've got 1,048, and there's 13 deaths. So I mean, the percentage is really low. I don't know. Like, the only, like, I just gotta harp on this again. Like, if you can't take bad news too well, if it affects you, because I know this affects some people, and it's just stay off social media and maybe watch an update once every couple of days or something. Try to focus on anything positive and keep your mind off of it. But
yeah,
like, and the only other thing I can say is make a routine, stick to it, and find ways where you can keep in touch with people, and set that up too. Like, set up like a weekly thing with your friends, and then have a network of people that in need, or when you need to reach out, you have a few people that you can call out to, because you don't know what anyone else is doing at any given point.
Sure. I think for many people, having a structured routine around socializing would be good, or a structured routine around being productive. I think productivity is an important thing. We're built to sublimate, so you can use some of this fear and some of this anger and all that, and you can put it towards doing something, intellectually or emotionally creative, and you can do something productive. You can write, you can read, you can learn an instrument, you can do all sorts of things right now. And that's also something that I would have scheduled in for your day, because the socializing is important, but also kind of expressing yourself, back to the celebrities singing Imagine. Expressing yourself is a fundamental human thing. So if you can find some new ways to express yourself, that's cool. Journaling should be, I think, very popular right now, because most people want to kind of see their thoughts written out. So you can enjoy kind of your self-reflective process. Go on a walk, do some journaling. There's a lot of different things you can do right now. None of them are, let's say, typically fun. It's not like going out to a bar. It's not like going to the beach. It's not like going to the gym, which I miss a lot, by the way. It's all these things that we can't do. So we have to come up with alternatives that are reasonably enjoyable, that get us through the time. Also, setting your expectations lower is probably the best thing you can do right now.
And also, like, one thing I told a few people to do, like, especially when they started, like, okay, we're going to lock down, buy stuff, you'll go get your supplies. If there's something you really like, let's just say, like, okay, Ferrero Rocher, those little chocolate things there. If you love those, right, go buy a box of them, keep them in your fridge, and, like, one a week or something like that, or one every couple of days. Like, that's your treat, that's your little special thing or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be extravagant, but something you really like that you can spoil yourself with.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Again, going back to working overseas, like, when I was working at the NATO headquarters in Kabul, literally about 100 yards away was this American base. And every Friday night on every American base, it was surf and turf. So there was either lobster steak or crab legs and steak. So nice. we would walk the 100 yards to the American base on the Friday nights, and just to go have dinner, because it was like, all right, it's Friday, we're gonna go get steak and lobster or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
I was like, oh, let's go there. Like, On the Canadian bases, they would do something every Sunday night. It was like they would do a special meal, like
Oh, okay.
like depending, like like sometimes it was barbecue, sometimes it was like they would have like that's where I ate kangaroo and ostrich and alligator and stuff like that, like so it was all right.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, do little things like that for yourself. I think it's important, and also if you aren't working and if you aren't going to school and you feel like people need to feel useful, people need to for
Yeah.
the most part, like knock on your neighbors' doors, see if they need something. Like I live in a building with a lot of old people, and
Yeah.
the few of us who aren't who aren't like I'm 50, but the few of us who are like 40, 50, we've offered like, okay, we'll go get your shopping, we'll go do all this, because there's a lot of people in this building who are past retirement age, and we're like, okay, you're more at risk, so let's if you want, we'll go do this stuff for you, and like just little things like that. It'll make you feel useful. It'll help people out. It'll give you some sort of sense of purpose, right?
Sure. I think there are thousands of things we can do to be helpful to people. And I think the bigger gestures, like going to get food or, helping them clean their house or whatever it is great. And I think even the simpler things, like a real simple conversation, giving someone a half an hour of your day, right? Just to chat, just to have regular human conversation. If you have a neighbor or a friend or people down the street, etc. This is a decent time to just do the little things, right? I remember this scene from the movie Awakenings with Robin Williams and what's his name, Robert De Niro, and De Niro plays this guy who has this terrible brain disease that keeps him frozen like a statue, and once he wakes up from it, he has this little speech about the simplest things and how they're such a big deal when you've been frozen and locked inside for all these years. And he just wants the simplest things, like to go for a walk and things like that. But because his disease is progressing again, he's getting kind of violent and the drugs aren't working, so they have to restrict him again. So the whole point of that little tangent is we really, really, really undervalue the simplest things. And I think focusing on them in this time would be great for us. The simplest things, like conversation, like being basically friendly.
Okay, I don't want to keep you too long, but one last thing is stress.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
I could have, let's say I went to Afghanistan, and that whole, I was usually on rotations, like 2 months in, 2 weeks out, or 3 months in, 3 weeks out, that kind of thing, right? So I could have done a whole rotation where I didn't leave the base and there was no attack on the base.
Sure.
Until I left Afghanistan and got to Dubai or Europe somewhere. Didn't realize how much stress you're under until you leave.
That's right.
The stress is going to mount, and it's it's like the frog in the boiling water, right? You don't notice
it.
Take some time to. I mean, I don't want to push anything. I used to do a lot of mindfulness when I was younger. I still do it every now and then. I know you're supposed to keep it up or whatever. If I'm getting stressed for a week, I'll do it for a week or something like that. But just little things like that, or sit and listen to music for a little bit. You don't have to specifically meditate or whatever. Take half an hour a day where you kind of shut everything else out. You need to take care of that stress, because I guarantee you're under a lot of it, and you're not going to feel it because it's going to build up slowly every day.
You bet. I couldn't agree more. And the issue is people choose one strategy over another, and they need to be doing both kinds of. There's two kinds of stress management strategies. There's preventative strategies, and then there's coping strategies, right? So the preventative strategies are things like meditation every day, and exercise, and eating appropriately, and getting the right amount of sleep, right? Those kinds of things are preventative medicine. We need to be doing those things to the best of our ability, right? That decreases the allostatic load. But we also need effective coping strategies too, right? So there's two broad categories of effective coping strategies for anxiety disorders. There's distraction-based strategies, and then there's action-based strategies. So distraction-based strategies are things like listening to music, or exercising, or going for a walk, stuff like that. But then the Active strategies are things like diaphragmatic breathing, and if you don't know what that is or how to do that, you're welcome to hit me up on Twitter, and I will gladly explain or send you the right links to explain that. Another one is called progressive muscle relaxation. It works great at calming your central nervous system down. And then I won't go, but there's others that you can use, but those two are probably the mainstays that if everyone just did these two coping strategies, these active coping strategies, they work great. They work phenomenally for most anxiety disorders. So, and I'm happy to give as much time to anyone who wants to talk about those things if they're struggling, because it's important that we do these things, both preventative and coping.
Okay, and I know I said that was the last thing, but I just want to mention this. It's depending on how long this goes, like it does. Hopefully, it's over as quickly as possible. But
yeah,
there might be times when you break down, right? Like it's gonna happen. Let it happen. Don't feel bad about it. Don't beat yourself up. But one thing, social media for things like that is awful. Unless you're feeling really confident, don't put it out there. Like like reach out to your friends privately. I think it's really bad to put your breakdowns out on social media, because you are going to get the fucking assholes who are going to take advantage of it. And now, especially if you're like that at that moment, even if you're strong all the rest of the time, at that moment you don't need all that BS. So I mean, like, okay, have the breakdown, sit in your room and cry or whatever you got to do. But reach out to friends. Like, I just wouldn't put out random messages on social media about that at this time. I just wouldn't.
Sure, I basically agree with that. If people are struggling and they're having what you could basically call a breakdown, or they're overwhelmed, definitely talk to your friends and family and other loved ones. And if that's not cutting it, just hit me up. Like, this is real simple. This is a time of crisis. I'm happy to take 15 phone calls a day from people who are panicking if need be. Whatever I can do to be helpful, right? This is just goodwill. That's all it is.
Well, anyways, on that note, I think you should end. Well, thanks a lot for that. Well, if you want to where they can get a hold of you, and then we'll end it up there.
Yeah, absolutely. The best place to get a hold of me is on Twitter. I think my handle is at PSYCHP Lockwood, Psych P Lockwood, and my DMs are always going to be open. So if you need to chat, I'm here. You can also see my website, patricklockwoodhealing.com, or my YouTube channel. But, for right now, if you need anything, just hit me up on Twitter, and I will happily be of support.
All right. Well, thanks a lot again, Patrick, and thank everyone for listening.